Hi everyone and welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show. We're covering a really interesting topic today, and that is the non-for-profit space and the Microsoft non-for-profit Accelerator. We explore challenges currently facing the industry and what Microsoft is doing to support this. Let's welcome Dan Lammot to the show, CEO of threshold.world. Do you have customers with field sales teams? Then you need to get in touch with MapTasker. Their solution enables businesses with field-based teams to lower their operating costs and increase productivity using the power of geospatial and location intelligence. Their field sales for Dynamics 365 product includes advanced capabilities that empowers effective territory management, optimized journey and route planning, and much more to enable companies with field-based teams to be at the top of their game. Field sales for Dynamics 365 also comes with their native iOS and Android apps, so field reps can easily access Dynamics 365 data on the go. Download your free version today from the Apple app or Google Play stores. Now let's get on with the show. Full show notes can be found for this episode at nz365guy.com/114. Hi Dan, welcome to the Dynamics 365 Practice Show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Great to have you on the show, and I think you've got an exciting topic around the whole non-for-profit space, and what Microsoft's doing in the accelerators for non-for-profit sector. In my past, I've done a lot of work working for non-for-profits using Dynamics 365. It's been a good fit for many organizations that I've seen in my experience. But before we get underway and unpacking kind of your journey in the non-for-profit space, what part of the world do you hail from, and what do you do in your spare time?
I currently live just outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in a town called Villanova with my wife and kids and a couple of dogs. And we spend a good bit of time in Puerto Rico as well, where she's from and where her kids are born. Anytime I get a chance, I'll go for a surf. It's kind of ironic that I live about 77 miles away from the water, but that's where life's led us, and get a good bit of time to go for a surf down in Puerto Rico when we're spending time down there. So that's my passion outside of work.
Nice. So are the surf beaches, are they safe? Are they left-hand or right-hand breaks? What's a common layout in Puerto Rico?
The surf there's pretty world-class, believe it or not. It's, aside from the water being warm and there being a lot of wildlife, it's really exciting to see when you're sitting in the water. You got lefts, you got rights, you got reef breaks, you got beach breaks, and depending on where the swell's coming from, you can get world-class waves just about any time. So it's a great spot.
Wow. Very nice. Very nice. And so what do you do in your hometown now when you're kind of not surfing?
If I'm not surfing and I'm not working, then it's family time. The rest of the time, that's as you know, when you're running a new company and working on building a movement around technology, it's pretty consuming. And so if I'm not doing that, then we're doing things with the kids, and they're at the age where there's lots of soccer games and things like that going on. So we get good quality family time and a lot of outdoor time and just doing things with them.
Okay, I've never been to Pennsylvania. What's it known for? What's the things to do there?
It's a big state, and the eastern part where we live, Philadelphia's got a lot of history in it. Aside from being the kind of the place where the country was born way back when.
Okay.
The more fun things it's known for are cheesesteaks. So if you ever come to town, we'll go down to Pat's Cheesesteaks and get a cheesesteak and maybe go catch a sporting event.
Nice. Sounds awesome. Sounds fantastic. So you're in the non-for-profit sector.
Yep.
Tell us, how did you get into that?
Well, kind of by accident, like a lot of people. I spent a lot of years, the early part of my career, doing banking and banking technology. Got really involved in CRM in the banking world. Started to work for progressively smaller companies to try to accelerate the pace of change and adoption of CRM technologies to unify the kind of global banking environment within bigger institutions. And with a group of folks, ended up being part of the founding team of a company that was doing Siebel implementations for large multinational banks. And fairly quickly after we got started with that, we got into working with a company called Salesforce. And that led us to banks and Salesforce. And then that company grew and was sold, ironically, just before the financial crisis in 2007. And then we, a couple of years later, launched another company focused on the educational market with Salesforce Technologies. And by happenstance, one of the sales people that we spent a lot of time with said, hey, there's this nonprofit up in Boston that's a really influential public media organization called WGBH. And one of the leaders at WGBH said, I really would like to work with you all to build a cloud-based fundraising system. And that's how we got our start. And so we very quickly pivoted the company within a few months and moved from education to nonprofit and spent a bunch of years working on nonprofit technology.
So in this space, is Blackboard kind of the big brand? In my experience, I've built systems for Red Cross, big systems. I built one solution that gave out over $100 million in grant money in a space about 2 months after the Christchurch earthquake. And I know that when I competed for that deal, I was up against this product called Blackboard, or this business called Blackboard. Was that something that you came up against in Round Corner as well?
Very much so. Yeah, Blackboard's been around for many, many years. They've, in many ways have dominated the marketplace through technology they've built proprietarily, but also through a lot of acquisitions that they've made. On the plus side, they've done a great service for the market by delivering high quality technology over the years. And like any big company, there's mixed feelings about their stance. And at Round Corner, we did compete almost exclusively, especially in the enterprise space with Blackboard, and won sometimes and lost sometimes.
Yeah. So you ended up selling that company, right? And that became part of, did Salesforce acquire it directly?
Yes. Yeah. The part of Salesforce that purchased Round Corner was threshold.world, which was the philanthropic partner of Salesforce.com, which subsequently in the last month or two has become part of Salesforce.com itself.
Wow. Okay. I didn't even know that they had this .org part of their business.
Yeah. When we started Round Corner, it was a very small organization in terms of employee size, but was doing quite a lot to provision Salesforce technologies for nonprofits. But even though it was a half a dozen team members or so, they were really focused, as people that follow Salesforce will know, from the very outset on making philanthropy part of their business mission. And then I think, I don't know what the exact employee count is or was, today, but it's quite a large organization with global reach and tens of thousands of customers. So they've really grown over the past decade or so.
So you obviously have a lot of experience in understanding this non-for-profit sector.
Well, I feel like I'm just scratching the surface, but thanks for saying it's a huge sector, and it's got an incredible amount of diversity within it. And, there's all different types of nonprofits that, raise money and make investments and deliver programs. And so I feel like I've got a good beat on some of the processes that they focus on, and have been working on technology in the sector for a decade or so, but still so much to learn.
So you exited that business. What made you take a look at Microsoft?
Well, it was really three things. The first was that it just seemed like, and I think this is really proven true now that I'm working directly with Microsoft for about 7 months or so, it just seemed like there was a renaissance happening here. And, I'd been in the Salesforce space for 15 years and frankly hadn't really paid a whole lot of attention to what was going on elsewhere. And you started to see Microsoft pop up more, started to see Satya pop up more. And so, it looked like something was happening here that was meaningful, and that it was really backed by, culture and an ethos for partnership. So that was interesting. The second was that we started to see Microsoft come up more in customers' minds, because they saw potential for interoperability of systems based on the new Microsoft technology that's out and still evolving. And to me, that was a really important theme. Was stuff's got to work together for any organization that adopts technology, but certainly for nonprofits who may have more constrained budgets and resourcing. And the last was that there's this person that works inside of the Microsoft Tech for Social Impact group named Eric Arnold, who's the global CTO. And we saw him move over into Microsoft and take on that role as the global CTO to help define solutions purpose-built for nonprofits as part of this overall industry vision and industry accelerator vision. And that really is what initiated the conversation, was seeing this gentleman named Eric move over, and that knowing Eric and knowing his background was something that we paid attention to, and that I paid attention to, because he's an authentic, real person that's doing this for all the right reasons, and really wants to, given his history in the sector, wants to make sure that things are going to be as they should be for any customer, but certainly for nonprofits.
Yeah. I've got a feeling I've met Eric recently. When I
Mm.
say met him, he was presenting, I think, at a Hack for Good event I was at in
Yeah.
Atlanta. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
pretty sure he headed up the Microsoft part of that engagement.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. When you see somebody like that make a move,
Hmm.
you take notice. And, I've, again, now being here for 7 months or so, working with the Tech for Social Impact team, it's really wonderful to partner with that group. And so we'll probably talk about in a bit. He's got a great vision for where Tech for Social Impact is going to go with solutions.
So just tell us a bit about Tech for Social Impact. As a lot of people won't know what it is and where it sits.
Yeah, it's part of Microsoft Philanthropies, and it's headed up by a gentleman named Justin Spellhog. He's got a leadership team which Eric and others are included in, and their job is to really to define solutions and enable successful nonprofit adoption and development of an ecosystem around Microsoft technologies, specifically focused on nonprofits. And they're doing that through revising licensing schemes and improving just the general accessibility of Microsoft technologies in the space. That was really a huge first step that they took right out of the gate. They're also working on industry solutions like the Nonprofit Accelerator and contributing to sector-wide initiatives like the Nonprofit Common Data Model. And they're working really hard to develop an ecosystem of partners, both SIs and ISVs, that are building with and connecting to Microsoft technologies to try to serve nonprofits better in adoption of the full suite of Microsoft stuff, so to speak. And so they're a very busy team, but ultimately, if you really boil it down, they have a stewardship role in their view to ensure that Microsoft's doing the right things as it relates to technology and nonprofits.
Yeah, very good, very good. Is this kind of a recent initiative, particularly in the Microsoft Biz App space, that they're getting this heavily involved around creating a data model for non-for-profits?
Yeah, it's really just a couple of years old. And, while Microsoft has been very involved in philanthropies and in a host of different initiatives, including investments and, AI for Earth programs and addressing homelessness challenges in cities they live in. This is different in that it expands that to say, look, Microsoft's got great technology, it's evolving, it's going to be going interesting places, and it is hard to use it out of the box in some cases. And Microsoft wants to take a step further by really focusing on the industry-specific needs that nonprofits in all their diversity have, and help close that gap, to decrease the cost to implement, and at the same time ensure longer-term sustainability for nonprofit customers that adopt. So that's a big task. It's a journey, it's a marathon, so to speak. And I think it's really clear that a fundamental tenet of this initiative is that Microsoft's not doing this alone, knows that they can't do it alone. They're really taking a partner-centric approach to this effort, and which includes us and many others, and collaborating with a sector-wide group of both experts as well as customers and prospective customers and customer steering teams and partners alike to try to define things that will actually have a significantly meaningful impact for the market.
Fantastic. So tell me then about Threshold, your new startup. Is it threshold.world? Is that the address for the website?
Yeah, the official name is threshold.world, and the website is actually threshold.world. And this company is a relatively new initiative. It's about 7 months old. And as it says on the website, the vision behind this is that we believe the world is at a threshold moment. And the decisions we make at this point in time are going to determine the future for life on the planet. And while, technology's had a huge role in addressing societal challenges, we really feel like that with where technology is today, that story is just beginning, and we want to play a role in that. So that's what we're doing, is we're trying to find the most efficient and impactful ways to see how technology can accelerate the pace of social change in a world where we really need that to happen.
Okay, so you use the word threshold, that you believe the world's at a threshold point, and normally I hear the word, transformation point or something like that, is the word at the moment. Tell me a bit about what you mean by threshold.
Sure. Yeah. Are you familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals? So the idea for the name actually came from trying to study, what are the areas of greatest need. And the United Nations, among many other partners, has come together and put together the Sustainable Development Goals, And if you read the goals and you read the annual reports on global progress towards those goals, one thing comes up over and over again is that to know where you are relative to a goal, you've got to be able to measure where you were, where you are, and where you think you're going. And so the goals have targets. The targets have something called indicators, which are essentially quantifiable progress towards or away from a target. And each of them have thresholds. And the one that really stuck out to me within that was the temperature of the planet. And being a surfer and someone who cares a lot about the environment, among many other causes, there's still a lot of talk these days about the threshold of 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees and what impact that's going to have. And so that's actually what spurred the idea was studying the goals and understanding, that there's this movement around trying to, mobilize everybody on the planet to do more to try to protect our environment, to try to support each other, bring more equity into society, protect the species on the planet. And so that's really where the name came from. So the dot in the name, the dot world is the point in time that we're at today. So that's how it all came together.
I like it. So tell me, what's your role and what do you see the vision of your businesses?
So I'm honored to serve in the role of CEO with a growing team that's bringing together kind of a mix of startup and software development experience in the cloud, and coupled with a real passion for doing things that matter. And I'm also a co-founder of the organization. And the vision I have is really based on the last 10 years of work. I spent a lot of time working in nonprofit fundraising, helping organizations try to raise more funds to support their missions. Spent a lot of time in grant making, where organizations were either directly or indirectly making investments in the missions that they cared about. Mm-hmm. And this time around, our focus is going to be on the impact side, where nonprofits are actually delivering the work. And we're going to be looking at technology's role in measuring, monitoring, evaluating, learning from, and improving the programmatic outcomes that nonprofits seek to achieve, either directly or through their partnerships. Mm-hmm. So that's so we're sort of at the tail end of the spectrum, but the key focus that we're really looking at there is the association to the beneficiary. It's one thing to say, we dug a well, and you can count that, right? You dug a well, mm-hmm. That's great. That's an output. But the question is, what's the near-term outcome that happens as a result of that? Maybe 30 girls and other young boys in a village get to go to school. That's also great. Mm-hmm. But the big question that's much tougher to get at is what's the actual impact that results in? Right? What's the societal change that occurs as a result of that initial action? And then how do you ensure that there's transparency back to the supporters and donors at the beginning of that process about that output-outcome impact spectrum? And given where we are with AI, ML, and augmented analytics, how can those things help nonprofits and funders make better decisions about the things they invest in? We want to try to accelerate the pace of change by mm-hmm. using technology. And so this is really about looking at those specific actions that take place, those interventions that get deployed, and try to bring more meaningful insights into those decisions.
Interesting. So one of the non-for-profits I worked for in the past was World Vision. And one of the things that they said was that donors more than ever want to kind of get up and close and personal with where their money's going. They don't want just, a letter or something like that. They really want to kind of understand what is their money being spent on. And even in a lot of cases, they want to go visit where it's been spent. So do you see a change or a pivot in the way non-for-profits are now, I feel like, being accountable and engaging with the donor community?
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And I think that's a broader societal thing as well, right? Mm-hmm. As an example, if you go to Airbnb, you book a place on Airbnb, you can also book an experience at the same time, right? People want, despite our connectivity and our ability to hop on a steel tube and basically fly anywhere around the planet, we lack this sense of meaning. And now more than ever, and we see this in the data, the younger generations, they want to do things that matter, right? Mm-hmm. They will accept less pay for more meaningful work. And they ought not to have to do that, right? But I think ultimately people want to see the impact of their choices. They want to experience it. As an aside, 1 in 4 people in the United States volunteers for a nonprofit every year. And they do that because they want to feel that, right? They want that proximity to the impact itself. They want to see the people that they're helping. And if they're far away, they want to know about it. But the interesting thing within all of that is that within the technology space, we can collapse the distance between a donor and a beneficiary quite easily. You can allow someone to select the animal that they want to, gift or provide for a market. You can enable correspondence either digitally or otherwise between these organizations, but the concept of safeguarding, right, and protecting the beneficiary's information, protecting the donor's information in this connected space is more important than ever. So, it's one thing to be able to do it. It's another to be able to do it in a safe and secure way. And so this theme of trust is just as important as being able to create that connection.
Yeah. And so what role does volunteer tourism type play in it as well?
Yeah, I think it actually has a big role, right? I think that those are the kinds of memories that people want to build. They're the things that people take home with them more than buying a coffee cup or perhaps even just seeing a monument. Those human interactions are really special, or those animal interactions are really special, and the growth of things like ecotourism and other types of activities like that around the world are really on the rise for the reasons you stated. So I think we'll see lots more volunteerism. I think we'll see more episodic volunteerism, and I think that nonprofits want to capture those moments and then steward those relationships over the long term, so that we'll see the introduction of more and more technology into that to try to sustain those connections, because it is a very competitive market in the nonprofit space, right? And people are, the generations before us tended to donate generally to, one or two institutions, and they did it with trust. Often it was the religious affiliation that they had, right? Or if you cared about poverty, you just picked the big poverty organization. But the data says that, we're going to see a lot more small micro donations. Younger donors are more fickle, and a lot of their donation is going to be, and their support is going to be based on that experience and the give-get, equation that comes out of those support actions.
So let's unpack a few statistics around the non-for-profit sector, because I got a feeling that I don't understand, if you like, how big the sector is, not just, in North America, but Europe and the world.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's, I was shocked about it when we started to think about nonprofits as well. And I think that especially if you're in the technology sector and your business is driven by selling SaaS-based software or licenses or transaction volumes, et cetera. There's really only three numbers you need to know. There are many that are meaningful, but if you're thinking about this as a technologist or as a business opportunity where you want to have impact and run a viable business, you really just need to know that there's more than 4 million nonprofits globally.
Wow.
About 1.5 million in the United States, right? Depending on which way you want to look at it, whether they're registered or unregistered, et cetera. So the first one is that there's millions of nonprofits globally. And as you'd expect, there's really big ones and there's lots of really small ones. The second number that's important to know is that the nonprofit sector, if you include education and health, which are qualified nonprofits in the U.S. generally, it's the third largest sector of employment in the United States. So there are lots and lots of people that work at nonprofits, and they're again, there's a diversity of roles within that. You have people in health and human services. You've got folks that are doing fundraising and 1,000 other things. But it's a huge sector, lots of people, and so lots of opportunity for technology to play a role in their day-to-day lives. And the final one is that if you look at just the United States market, over $400 billion a year for the last couple of years has been donated. So there's a huge amount of money flowing through the nonprofit sector, from private citizens and from enterprise and from foundations. So there's, those are three different angles to look at it in terms of the size and scale of the number of organizations you could work with, the number of people that work within the sector, and then the amount of money that's flowing through it, to try to support the causes that people care about. So it's huge. And that, that also means that there's lots of room for improvement.
Yeah. So just let me get this right. The 434. So 4 million worldwide, third largest sector of employment in the US, and 400 billion a year is donated.
Yep.
Those are
Just
some
in
staggering numbers.
It's big, right? It's big. I had no idea, how large it is, and it's growing as well, right? I mean, there's twice as many nonprofits today as there were a couple of decades ago. So clearly, it's a growth sector, and one that people don't pay attention to quite much because they feel like it's just a feel good thing, and they feel like there's no business opportunity in the nonprofit sector, and those are false assumptions.
And so recently I was just watching a TED Talk, a couple of Swedish scientists talking about the facts and changes around the world that perhaps a lot of people are not up to speed on, like the poverty level is the lowest time in history, the three big killers in the world, whether it be famine, what's the other one, war, and the third one, disease, are really been taken into check by a lot of the work these not-for-profits are doing.
Yeah. There's tremendous progress that's being made, and Bill Gates and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation put out some great YouTube videos about how we should be optimistic about where we're going.
Yeah.
All right, but the reality is we're not moving fast enough, and if you just use those Sustainable Development Goals as one barometer, there's no country that's on track to meet all the goals by 2030, which is the deadline. Not a single country. Maybe one, actually, based on the latest report that just came out a few days ago that I haven't had a chance to get through.
Okay.
So yeah, it's true. I mean, there's tremendous progress, and there's still over 1.1 billion people that lack access to clean water. Right? That's like 1 in 7. There's still 260 something million children that lack access to education. So we've got a long way to go, and so we're not done yet. And neither are the nonprofits.
And that's the thing with big numbers, right? They fail to sometimes impact us, that this is individual lives that it affects.
That's right.
I think it was Mother Teresa said that if I looked at the masses, I'm overcome, if you like, but when I look at the individual, I'm moved to take action.
It's such a great quote. Yeah, absolutely. And in the tech world and with geeks like us, we get enamored by the systems that we build and the progress that it makes and so forth. But and this applies to any business, but certainly in the nonprofit world, there's a story behind every record in that database, right? A life story of challenge and strife and potentially even progress. So it's really, really important to remember that. So thanks for saying that. Started my day off great.
So what do you see as the biggest challenge in the next 3 to 5 years facing the sector?
I think there are many. It's tough to just pick one, but I think the biggest issue, the biggest challenge is going to continue to be fundraising. Right? At the end of the day, that's where revenue comes from. The organizations that are there are going to have a challenge. They've had challenges for many years, but it's really difficult to raise money in the nonprofit sector, right? And nonprofits are incredibly adaptive. They're incredibly creative with the way that they raise funds. But to do what they do, they're just like any business or any organization. They've got to have support to make that happen. They've got to have customers. And one of the big differences that people don't think about with nonprofits versus the corporate sector is in the commercial space, right? The person that gives you money is also your customer, right? Like if you go buy something from Amazon, you give them money, they give you something. It's the same person, same interchange. In the nonprofit sector, the person that gives you money is generally not the person who receives the benefit, right? And so there's that duality in the nonprofit sector versus in the commercial space. It represents a huge difference. And so you gotta be able to find ways to earn the trust of someone for them to give you that support, whether it's their time or their funds, and then you're going to give the benefit generally to someone else. And so that's a really difficult equation to work with. And so, in a world where there are more nonprofits, and while giving is growing, it's certainly not growing fast enough. And if you look at the challenges facing the sector, it's certainly fundraising.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Anything else?
Well, I think the second one is the problem area we're working on, which is meant to support fundraising efforts, but ultimately the outcomes that the nonprofits want to achieve, which is the program efficacy. In a world where there are lots of choices about what nonprofits can do, there's more and more data transparency in the sector. That's one of the really interesting things that you find in the nonprofit world that you don't see as much in the commercial space, is the willingness to share. And so, making the best choices around what you do, what interventions you apply, for the benefit of the people, the environment, the beach, the tree, the species, whatever it is. That's the second biggest challenge in our book, and that's the problem we're going to focus on.
Excellent. So let's now unpack what you're doing around the non-for-profit accelerator with Microsoft, your ISV experience, because I understand you're operating it as an ISV with Threshold. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we are doing work with Microsoft Tech for Social Impact around the accelerator, and then we're also creating our own path that is aligned with the nonprofit accelerator as an ISV.
Okay, so tell me about what this accelerator is. What was the goals of creating it? What version we're up to? Just give us a bit of detail around the whole process and what's available.
Sure. Yeah, the nonprofit accelerator is one of several industry accelerators in the Microsoft ecosystem, as you probably know. So there's a health accelerator, there's a banking accelerator, there's an auto accelerator, there's an education accelerator. And so, the nonprofit accelerator, which was the second one that launched behind health, is part of a broader industry-focused strategy across the whole Microsoft enterprise. So that's kind of the first thing to focus on. And each of the accelerators brings together a community of partners, customers, influencers, experts, et cetera, to try to take the raw common data model and common data service, which in my book is this secret sauce of the Microsoft technology stack. And it tries to take a big step forward to deliver industry-specific, entities and attributes or fields and tables, business processes, et cetera, to improve the interoperability of applications that are developed across the whole spectrum of Microsoft technologies, so that customers that adopt Microsoft technologies across a diversity of that spectrum, whether it's a single application developed with a systems integrator or multiple applications coming from a diversity of different ISVs, that those things work together, right? And that's, in my view, is really the strategy behind this, is to accelerate adoption within industries of Microsoft technologies and connectivity to third-party technologies and more rapid time to market, and the ability for organizations to adopt these technologies and know that they're going to work better together.
So can you explain to me the common data model for the non-for-profit accelerator?
Sure, yeah.
What are the big moving parts in that common data model?
Yeah, so the common data model and the nonprofit accelerator are two different things, and they're very related. The common data model is actually consumed by the nonprofit accelerator, but there's a really important distinction that Tech for Social Impact is that, and it's a key part of Tech for Social Impact's vision, is that the common data model for nonprofits does not carry the Microsoft brand, right? It is not a Microsoft technology. And the idea behind this, and this is really driven by Eric Arnold's vision, who we spoke about earlier, was to try to bring together people across the industry to have a conversation about what is a common data model that would help facilitate interoperability across the ecosystem, but also following the data all the way through the nonprofit business cycle. So from an idea about, hey, we've got an issue, there's a hazard, there's a disaster, right? We want to raise money for this initiative, to the funds coming in, to that money going out and being invested, applied to a specific nonprofit program or intervention associated to a beneficiary, and then brought back up transparently to the person that provided the support in the first place. So a real closed loop data model that allows for facilitation of flow of data and information across a nonprofit cycle. So that's really what the common data model for nonprofits does. And it's open source. It's available on GitHub. It actually was, the contributors to the common data model are competitors of Microsoft. They're partners of Microsoft. There's a customer steering team, and a huge number of people have taken part in that. And so the interesting thing about the common data model and the nonprofit accelerator, and you'd hear this from Tech for Social Impact as well, was that, if you put this common data model out there, Microsoft Tech for Social Impact wants to be a great customer of the common data model for nonprofits. And so the nonprofit accelerator incorporates that common data model into the Microsoft Dynamics 365 environment and into the common data service. So you first start with this closed loop, business cycle in the common data model for nonprofits, and then you incorporate that into the Dynamics 365 environment. And now you're able to go forth with this, kind of template application. It's not small, right? It includes about 75 additional entities that are nonprofit specific entities. Things like, donor commitment, right, which represents a pledge between a donor and an organization to make a donation. It includes a full grant and award cycle. It includes program delivery and program results, and it includes a beneficiary architecture as well. So it's got 75 entities, about over 1,400 attributes, and it's developed in a layered model. So you actually can access the nonprofit common data model through the common data service. So you can build applications, whether you want to build Power BI apps or Dynamics 365 apps, or you want to access it through basically any other Microsoft service. Or, you can just build applications in Teams with it as well, or in Modern Workplace and so on and so forth. So the real vision is about, getting this out there to provide a common ground floor upon which interoperability is the key, and then enable the partner ecosystem to go apply their own creativity and ingenuity to developing applications and getting them into the marketplace.
Okay, so the common data model is really a data schema, right, that can be used across industry. What's available on GitHub, is that automatically installable into the common data service?
Yes. Yeah. There's both managed and unmanaged solutions available on GitHub. And the nonprofit Accelerator itself is available on AppSource. So you can download it from AppSource and install it in a Dynamics environment.
Gotcha. What surprises me is that Microsoft called it Dynamics 365 Non-for-Profit Accelerator, rather than just the Non-for-Profit Accelerator, because if you've got the word Dynamics 365 in there, it tells me you've got to take a license dependency on Dynamics 365. And of course, with the new world we live in, really, there's no reason why you couldn't put it straight into the common data service without any Dynamics 365 dependency.
That is an excellent point. And the release that just went to public preview yesterday on the first day of Inspire actually removes that dependency.
Hallelujah.
And brings it back in. And that was really important for the business applications group and their overall strategy. So, and the vision is that you'd be able to access it anywhere across the CDS or common data service. And there are finance and operations use cases, there are Dynamics 365 use cases, and there's, I think, about 60 partners now building applications across the whole spectrum. So it's really gained a lot of momentum in the last 7 months or so.
So I see, though, that the three main partners that kicked this off was yourself, threshold.world, it was Avid, and it was Blackboard as well. So speaking of those competitor involvement.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, Blackboard and Microsoft have a really, a multifaceted relationship, and I'm an outsider in that, but I can honestly say that both of those organizations and many others have been huge contributors to this overall effort. It's a better together mentality that I'm sure was forged through many conversations long before I got involved between the Tech for Social Impact team and the Blackboard leadership but I've been on the customer side of that, where I've seen that customers just want things that work, right? And there are many different technologies that can work, and it's not always just about the tech. Often it's about what the skill set is within the nonprofit. And so, this better together ideology that Microsoft and Blackboard and Avid and many others are employing, including us, I think is really what the sector deserves. And so it's great to see, Microsoft have a big voice in that, and to be a convener in that sense. And I think that they take, that role of stewardship on really, really seriously. So
good. So I keep going back to the common data model because I feel that there's a lot of people that still aren't 100% on how that differs from the common data service.
Sure.
And so let's use a real example. So if we took, for example, the concept of a donor, it's basically all the kind of fields, the data capture sets, etc., that you would commonly use no matter what non-for-profit you worked in when you understood the concept of a donor. So just like you have a real person that donates money, or an organization, a legal entity that donates money, it's basically what are the type of data sets that we need to capture that we can all agree on has a common way of labeling a donor. Would that be right?
Very well said. Yeah. Very, very
Excellent.
well said.
And then all that we're doing with a common data model is dropping that into the technology infrastructure of the common data service, which involves, compute, multiple database technologies, multiple integration technologies, and really lights up the building of any application that serves the non-for-profit sector.
Very well said. Perfect.
Excellent, excellent. So how did your relationship originally come about with Microsoft and all this?
Well, it started with that watching Eric Arnold move in.
Okay, so that was the lead in.
Yep. And then it started with the question, which was really, what are you doing over there at Microsoft? What is going on? What's the vision? What's the plan? And, there were many discussions, but I can honestly say the one that I really remember was when this idea of the common data service really sank in for me.
Yeah.
Having spent 20 years building CRM systems, building technology on platforms, doing a lot of work with integrations, especially because most of my history was in enterprise, where there were large systems or tens of thousands of users. When it really sank in to me that you actually could surface the data across any service and it could flow across the spectrum, I think I almost fell out of my chair. Because I kept, thinking about all of the conversations I was having with CIOs who were in the past who were saying, look, I know you're innovative. Like, I get it, right? And I know that the platforms you're working with are going to have a constant stream of innovation, but I don't have time to evaluate all the options. I need you to bring things to me that work. Give me a couple of choices and show me how I can have the data flow across all of my different applications and be able to, ensure that my business operations aren't going to be interrupted and that I don't have to do transformations every single time I'm going to take a hop and go from marketing to service. And so when I saw that that's really where Microsoft was heading, to me, I said, that's just something I got to be part of. That's something that I want to do. I think that while it's a technical differentiator, I think that the business impact that it can potentially drive, and especially for nonprofits that I really want to focus on for the rest of my career, I think that's breathtaking. I really do. And it's something that people are really getting their heads around now, and I think that's what's really driving momentum towards Microsoft's initiative in the space.
So what was the biggest difference between the first iteration of the Accelerator and what's just been announced this week at Inspire?
Wow, there's a lot of differences. I think the first version was launched at the NetHope Global Summit in Dublin, and Justin Spellhag and Eric introduced it there. The biggest thing that's changed is the connectivity across the whole data model. The first version, had components, full-fledged components for fundraising, grant management, program delivery. Right. So you could do all of those operations. You could build applications on any of those operations, or you could customize the environment to accomplish those things. But since then, the team and I, with our contributions to it, we've really focused on the interoperability and the ability for a single donation and that support to flow all the way and very specifically down to a named beneficiary, whether it's a person or an entity, and then provide that connectivity back to the person that provided the support in the first place. So really significant strides, and a lot of conversations have taken place around creating that closed loop so that people can do anything they want across the whole spectrum and be able to have the data flow, almost seamlessly throughout the whole process. And if I could add another one, there's a real interest in standards-based approaches inside of the common data model for nonprofits as well as this, because that's one of the challenges, right? If we don't have a common language to describe the impact, it's difficult to be able to normalize the data and then therefore gain insights across it. So we've incorporated an international standard called the IATI standard.
How do you spell it?
IATI, or the International Aid Transparency Initiative.
I love it.
Right, and it's essentially it's an open standard, and it's a taxonomy for looking at the flow of funds and the impact that results from programmatic activities in the nonprofit world. And governments like the UK government and other European governments are mandating that people that they fund report their outcomes according to this standard. And so the whole initiative is about transparency. which goes back to that theme of trust. And so there's an optional add-on with the Accelerator that incorporates the IATI standard and enables people to use the Dynamics 365 environment to report on the IATI standard. Mm-hmm. The version that just came out this week has a button that you can click, and it will actually generate the XML.
Fantastic.
That can be consumed by the IATI reporting agencies. And so I think that those are the two biggest things is, the flow of funding and effort throughout the full cycle, and the incorporation of standards that should make it easier for people to adopt and accomplish business goals that they have as requirements.
So good. So what do you think is going to be the big impact that's going to happen with this accelerator, what Microsoft's doing, and also what is the opportunity to ISVs, even yourself? What are you going to do now with what Microsoft's provided here?
Yeah, maybe a three-part answer. I think the impact that it's going to have is that it's, first and foremost, it started a conversation around interoperability that's been going on for a long time, but this is a demonstrated effort, with huge investment of time, effort, and, convening on Microsoft's part, and the other partners like Blackbaud and ourselves to really bring people together to say, look, we're going to do this better, right? We're going to make sure that things work together for the benefit of the sector. Mm-hmm. And so that is something that people have been looking for. And that's why organizations like Blackbaud are participating in it, because everybody knows this is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So, and the second piece is, I think that it is enabling partners to accelerate their development and delivery of applications into the marketplace. So the opportunity for ISVs is that you don't have to go figure out what is a data model for a donor, right? What is a data model for making grants and awards or scholarships? That's all there. And it's based on, an industry, a sector-wide collaboration based on, decades worth of best practice. That doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean it's going to be right forever, because all these things are adapting. But it's a huge first start. I mean, if you think about the fact that it delivers, 1,500 attributes across 75 different connected entities, that's a big step. Figuring out the data model for your application is one of the hardest things to do. And if you make bad decisions in that architecture, then your app's going to have really difficult challenges along the road. You're going to accumulate a lot of tech debt that you might not otherwise need to do. So this investment is a really important one. And, beyond that, I think it enforces or at least enables a level of interoperability between systems, which we're already seeing play out. There's a couple of brilliant use cases where partners have picked up the nonprofit accelerator and the health accelerator for health related nonprofit use cases.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And guess what? They just work together, right? Mm-hmm. They just work together, and you don't have to. Nothing breaks. They operate fine in the same environment, and so we're seeing real creativity being employed. And in fact, one of the winners at Inspire of the Partner of the Year, their solution incorporates the nonprofit accelerator. So if that's not evidence of what's possible, I'm not sure what is.
So good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, our time's nearly up. I feel like I could keep asking you a lot more questions. Such an interesting area. But to wrap up, I just got some quick fire questions for you. So a bit different. So what was your first paying job?
My father was an orthopedic surgeon, and I did the laundry for his practice. So I washed stinky towels and stuff like that. Yeah.
All the scrubs.
Yep, I was a scrub.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you could go anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be and why?
I would go, that's a tough question. There's so many places to go. I think I would go to the Maldives, because it's always been a place I wanted to go see. And it may not be there forever, given what's happening with our climate.
Okay. So what's the key highlight of your career?
Jeez. You ask tough questions. These are not rapid fire questions. I would say founding this company, threshold.world. There've been so many ups and downs over the years, and I think that this is really the first time that I and my wife is my co-founder, and we get to sort of do things the way that we really like to do them. And so this has just been a real pleasure and a real honor.
So good. Who do you recommend as a guest for this podcast in the future?
I think you should talk to Eric Arnold from Tech for Social Impact.
Okay. Dan, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. If people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do this?
My email is really easy. It's just dan@threshold.world. And that email's up on our website, and feel free to find me there. I'm also on LinkedIn, and look for me around the Microsoft world going forward.
Thanks again for joining us on today's Dynamics 365 show. Full show notes can be found at nz365guy.com/114. I'm your host, Business Applications MVP, Mark Smith, otherwise known as the NZ365 Guy. For all the latest news, subscribe now at nz365guy.com. Also, if you have time and love the show, I'd really appreciate a review. Find NZ365 Guy on any good podcast player and leave a comment. Bye for now.